Welcome to a new vision of reality, TSK for the 21st century, our new series on the time-space knowledge vision. TSK starts from the radical suggestion that deep, open-ended, sustained inquiry into time, space, and knowledge, as fundamental facets or elements of our being, can have a profoundly transformative impact on our ways of being and knowing in the world. Many in our time, as we are moving into the third decade of the 21st century, feel that we're caught up rather surprisingly in various crises of meaning and sense-making. And I've long felt that TSK is powerfully resonant with and relevant to the various integral, metamodern, and other communities attempting to address these crises. So I wanted to open up a series where we could explore TSK retrospectively, considering its origins and intentions, and prospectively, in light of what wisdom and ways of working it might offer us going forward. For the 12th episode of A New Vision of Reality, I'm happy to be joined by Elissa Slanger, a former ski instructor, a world traveler, a psychologist, and a TSK and Kumye instructor. All right, well, welcome, Elissa. I'm happy to meet with you, and I was not aware of your work before, but I was very grateful to Jack Petranker for putting me in touch with you.
Yes, as was I.
And I would like to start, just with a little background. This has been a hit and miss question when I've asked other people. It's definitely been some yeses and some nos, but in thinking about how you got involved with TSK, I'd first just like to ask, were there any experiences in your childhood, any formative experiences or interests or inclinations that maybe presaged your move in this direction to following a path of spiritual inquiry?
Absolutely. I've watched you this being answered by some of your other interviewees, and nobody seemed to have had experiences, and I definitely did. I definitely did. And actually, it's a kind of a long and winding story. So if you think it's going on too long, just interrupt me and we'll go to something else. But when I was quite young, and maybe 7 years old, certainly no older than 9, but I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, I recognized what death was, and I was panicked. I was just absolutely panicked at the thought of annihilation, and the fact that there was nothing we could do to turn that around and change it. But also, really, to me now, looking back, very interestingly, I recognized my consciousness, and I thought, how could that die? That can't die. And I thought, well, maybe other people don't have this, and I'll be the exception. I won't die. And then I thought, is this consciousness only mine, or do other people have consciousness, and does it just belong to me? Or so that whole idea was really gripped me, and I was really terrified and panicked at the thought of annihilation. And so when I was when I say something, I was pretty secretive about all of this. But if I did say something to adults, they would laugh and say, "Oh, you shouldn't have to worry about that. You have plenty of time to think about that," or whatever. Well, that wasn't helpful at all. So, when I was in my teens, I started to read the mystics, and what was available at that time. Because I have to say up front that I'm 90 years old. I was born in 1933. And so at that time, there wasn't much available that other than Christian mystics. but I thought that Christian mystics had answers. They had found out something, and they would. So because of this concern with death, I was wondering, well, why are we alive, and why are we alive and then die, and that whole existential issue. So I read quite a lot of the Christian mystics, and that really eased my concern somewhat. And I continued doing that, and then Eastern thought or philosophy or religion or whatever started to become available, and I started reading the Eastern tradition. And at some point, I don't remember exactly when it was, because I don't remember when his books started coming out, but certainly by college, I had read all of D.T. Suzuki's translations of the Zen teachings, and it seemed to me that there was a kernel in all of this. Whatever the mystics' background, there was a kernel that was shared. A kernel of that was shared, and the heart of it, and the interpretation then depended on their belief systems. So when I came across Buddhism, it seemed to me that there was less warping of the view in their original view with Buddhism than there was in other religions. And so I became very interested in Buddhism. Well, when I was in my 20s, I went on a 3-year odyssey around the world, and I was traveled in the East quite a bit, and because I was afraid to fly at that time, I took ships, and I remember that on a ship, a freighter going from Bangkok to Hong Kong, I always had books with me, and I realized that it was Japanese Buddhism that, and of course I had read D.T. Suzuki. But that was what I was most interested in. And then I realized it was really Zen, Rinzai Zen in particular, that I was most interested in. So on this odyssey, I went to Japan, and I didn't know how to go about finding out about Buddhism. So I was in my hotel in Tokyo, and I looked at a tourist guide, which said that Kyoto was the heart of Buddhism. So I got on a train and went to Kyoto. And then in Kyoto, I didn't know how to go about it. So is this getting too long? And
No, I'm very interested.
okay. So in Kyoto, I looked at my tourist book, and it said, I don't remember, Nanzenji, no, one of the monasteries was the biggest one. And so I thought, well, I'll start there. So I went to the monastery, and I knocked on the door, standing there with my suitcase. And I think I went in, or that, it was indicated that I could go in. And I walked in, I said, Gomen Kodasai, because I'd been told that that's what you say when you go into, a building. And a monk came running. And of course, because I said Gomen Kodasai, he thought I just spoke Japanese. So he started speaking Japanese to me. And then I indicated that no, I couldn't speak Japanese. So he gave me a piece of paper and a pencil, because in Japan, they do, a lot of them know some English, but it's all written English.
Mm-hmm.
They don't speak English. So I wrote on the pad, I want to study Zen. I want to stay here.
Hmm.
And the monk was shocked. And he indicated no, that was not possible.
Hmm.
But he wrote the name of a temple in Shokokuji monastery complex. So this was 1960, by the way,
Hmm.
where there was a priest who spoke English. So I took the streetcar to the Shokokuji, and again I found the temple, and I walked in. I said, "Gomen Kodasai," and this priest came out and started speaking to me in Japanese. But when I indicated that I didn't speak Japanese, he said in English, he asked me in English what it was I wanted, and I told him. And he said, yes, I could stay. He could give me a room, and he could give me the fundamentals of meditation, doing zazen. So I stayed there for 6 months. And I started, he gave me the fundamentals, and then I found a place where Westerners from all over the world did zazen, and 4 hours every day, and somebody who could give me some instruction, and that's what I did. And while I was also doing things I thought went along with Zen. I was doing brush painting and judo, and taking Japanese lessons. So I stayed in Japan until it came to the point where I would have to commit to a Zen master and start koan study. And that would then be, roughly 12 years.
Hmm.
And at that point, and I have to emphasize I was in my 20s, and at that point, I didn't feel ready to do that.
Hmm.
So when I left Japan, everybody thought that I thought I was coming back as soon as, I had felt ready to commit to that. And everybody there felt that I thought I was coming back. And for many, many years, I thought I was going back until I realized at some point that I wasn't. Yeah.
Hmm.
So anyway, is it, again, if you feel this is going on too long, Bruce, you just tell me, and we'll move on to something else. But I'm getting to how I got to TSK.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
So
resonating with the story because I think I had a similar journey, a confrontation with death in multiple forms when I was young, and a lot of existential crisis
wow,
around that,
wow.
turning to Christian mysticism, going deep into Christian mystical practice, and then through Christian mystical practice, discovering D.T. Suzuki.
Oh my
Um,
God, that's
yeah.
incredible.
And then taking off, and I lived in Asia for a little bit over 3 years, traveling among monasteries and ashrams. So a lot of mirroring there, which I'm
Yes.
really appreciating. So yeah, the next question I wanted to ask, which is basically, I'll just insert it for you to just continue the narrative in that direction, which is, yeah, what brought you to TSK, and was it through personal or professional? It sounds more like a personal journey.
Yeah. Oh, it was a personal journey. Yeah. So I'll try to kind of give more of the Reader's Digest version. Uh, anyway, so when I left Japan, I went on the way back to the States. I went through Europe, and I studied for a while at the London Buddhist Society. I was with them, and then I ended up in San Francisco, and was Suzuki Roshi. He's one of his first students. He was the one who wrote Beginner's Mind. And the Zen Center in San Francisco, I was there at very, very early days. We met up in an attic. I think it was in a synagogue or something. anyway, so I studied, I was practicing and studying Zen for a number of years. And then in 1970, my husband and I took a trip to Mount Everest. We walked from Kathmandu to Mount Everest. It was 250 miles. Took us a month. And I met a lot of Tibetans who had escaped, were escaping. And we were with the Sherpas, who were Vajrayana Buddhists. And I was tremendously drawn to Vajrayana Buddhism. And I actually I meditated in temples along the way. And so when I got back to the States, this was 1971. And so I was there 1970. 1971, that's when a lot of the Tibetan teachers were arriving in the States. And I immediately tried to find a Tibetan teacher, and I found Tarthang Tulku, and I went to his house and had a personal meeting with him, which really blew my mind. It was just absolutely incredible. And I have to say that at this point, I was living in the mountains, and it wasn't so easy to get. He was in Berkeley. It was I was working as a ski instructor, and I think I met him in the fall, and so then I was busy teaching skiing, so I couldn't, on a regular basis go down to Berkeley. But when I was finished with the ski season, he was doing an intensive training. I forget what the name of it was, human potential something. And I mean, that was when a lot of the longtime teachers were introduced to him and to his teachings. But it sounded as if one had to be in the mental health field or something like that. And I didn't think being a ski instructor, I would qualify. So I also heard that Chogyam Trungpa was doing a long summer retreat in Colorado. So I went to Colorado and camped out, spent the summer there, and also in Boulder. And by the time I came back to California, the Ning Institute was going. So I started studying at the Ning Institute. I was living as I said, in the mountains. So I'd come down I'd spend like a week every 2 months. And I kept track of it. And when I ended up, I had been to 110 retreats or workshops. And then I eventually started teaching there. And so I taught there for a while, retreats and workshops. But in the course of studying there, that's TSK made its appearance, and just as another one of the teachings, I took some classes or workshops in TSK. And I have to admit that at first it didn't grab me that much. I found the book impenetrable, and I just found it very difficult. And then I had a workshop with Ken, and I always pronounce him McEwen, but I heard his name now pronounced differently. But McKean, is that how you pronounce it, Ken?
I think I've heard it as McKeon.
Okay, McKeon. Okay. So he's such a lovely man, and the workshop was a lovely workshop, but I remember the breakthrough for me was an object and its glow.
Mm-hmm.
And he led me through that. And it was I was stunned by the experience. And so then I did, I studied with other teachers, so over the years, I did a lot of of workshops and retreats. There was a fellow named Lee Nichols who taught for a while, and I did several with him, and then at one point, so I was still going down to the Enigma Institute. I was teaching, and I would take whenever I could, I would take some TSK teaching, and then a couple of things happened. I moved to Reno, which was further away, and I got older. It was harder for me to travel down there. It was Steve Randall who invited me to join a group, a TSK group. And suddenly it just seemed as though a lot of TSK stuff started appearing online. So I did a bunch of things. I'm doing Elon Goldstein, I did some wonderful thing. I mean, he's an incredible teacher, I think, incredible. So I did things with him, and presently I'm doing something with Jack through CCI, and I teach. I've been teaching now online on Zoom for the past 5 years, every week. I do an hour and a half class, and part of it is Kame and part of is TSK.
Wonderful. Yeah, there are several things I'd like to ask you about before we kind of go into some of that work that you've been doing there. One, I understand we're just about at the 55th anniversary for Rinpoche coming to the United States. And there's some interest in, some renewal of the teachings and some renewed energy into spreading some of his work and honoring some of his work. And so just in light of that, I wanted to pause a moment when you said when you had that first meeting with him at his house that blew your mind. I'd love to hear just a little bit of a description of what was that encounter like and why did that blow your mind?
Well, I'm somewhat hesitant to go into a lot of it, but there's one thing I could tell you, and also this I think reveals his third level knowing. When I met with him, I said I've been studying Zen for 12 years. And I've reached a plateau, and I don't know how to break through it. And he said, "Well, let's meditate together." And he sat. His nose was this far away from my nose. I mean, his nose was, and he said, "Oh, just meditate." And I did. And he said, "You stay in your hara too long. You need to come up with your breath." So, I mean, this was, to me, this was incredible, that he could read this. But anyway, so then I did it, and I had just an opening experience. I mean, it was a transmission, and I had an opening experience, and yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And I also wanted to just pause a moment on that experience with the object and its glow. If you could say a little bit about that practice and what your experience was.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, to me, that practice was the elimination of duality. And so that was my first introduction to experience non-duality. And that has stayed with me. So I'd say that's present in my living.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's such a striking practice. And you mentioned when you first were encountering the TSK teachings, they didn't spark immediately, and the book was a bit impenetrable. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is just maybe some of the initial challenges or surprising things that you encountered when you first started working with TSK. So part of it might have been that impenetrability. And what my curiosity was is, what did you do to kind of work through that so that there was a turning point and it made sense as something to be working with and through?
Well, the exercises, I was able to connect with the exercises. There were several that immediately as soon as I started practicing them, I was able to they got through to me. And it's the theory, the conceptualization is not what's important to me. It's the integrating it into my living, the experience, and then integrating that into my living.
I think that's really it. It's actually, I teach TSK at the university, and I often find that there's about maybe a third of the class that gets excited about the ideas, but many more people get interested in it after we do some exercises. They get such a more natural way in to begin to feel what it's really about. And you mentioned that first book being, difficult to crack a bit. Were there or are there other books that have resonated with you in that TSK series or practices? What are any books or practices that have been meaningful for you?
Okay, well, I've gone through maybe all the books with this the group that Steve Randall had set up, and I continued on with them, and we went through the books. And I have to say that the exercises, or even I know people in that group, for example, for whom the readings, they break through with the reading. So there are people for whom that really works.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, all of it becomes secondary once the exercise or the text sparks the sensibility. In other words, once there's that opening, then the formal exercise is irrelevant. It's because I already got what it's driving towards. So I'll say that I don't read it anymore, because I think I've broken through. So I'll say that with my class, one of the exercises that I as I said, I combine Kumne and TSK, and surprisingly they go together very well. But at the start of a number of the classes, I do the mountain retreat practice, but if I just have them close their eyes and imagine that they're sitting in a place where they have an open view of the sky, and it's comfortable, the sun isn't on them, they're in shade, but they can see the sky clearly, and then just gaze at the sky. And it's amazing what the spaciousness that they can gain from that. And so we'll start with that, and then I do the Kumne exercise. I forget what it's called, but it's the ball of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we start doing Kumne exercises, and they have this spaciousness, this sense of spaciousness through the Kumne, throughout the Kumne exercises.
Wonderful. Yeah, I wanted to say, just as an aside, because you've mentioned Lee and Steve Randall. So I just taught a course with Lee last year.
Oh,
And
really?
when I moved out to California, my young family at that time landed at Steve Randall's house. And we lived together with him and had a nice period of collective group practice for a while at his place up in Hayward.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So in doing,
Where did you
working with
do the,
TS, oh yeah, go ahead.
where did you do the work with Lee?
We did a course online, and yeah, we put it together, combining some of the teachings some of the practices and ideas from David Michael Levin around working with the senses,
Hmm.
together with Lee's work on the holosoma, the Bohm's
Oh,
holoflux,
Bones. Yeah.
and then he's translated that into the rheosoma and the holosoma, working with the body. And so we integrated those things together, and I used some TSK and Kumne practices to support some of those inquiries in there.
Hmm. Oh, that's wonderful. And where did you do this?
We did it online.
Oh, online. That's right.
Right. Yeah. That was a nice experience. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he is. He's really an exceptional guy.
In working with, I know that they probably flow together in terms of all of the Kumye and the Buddhist practice and the TSK, but over the years of practice, I don't know if I read in your biography if it's right, you started maybe doing some TSK even as early as the 80s. But how has your sense of this is a very general question, it might not be easy to answer, but just your experience of time and space and knowledge, how have you felt them flower over time for you?
For me,
Yes.
I lived time and space. I, it's just it is who I am now.
Hmm. We may have another similarity in terms of background. And I studied psychotherapy, and I also read that maybe you do psychotherapeutic practice. So
Oh, I'm a retired psychologist. Yes.
got it. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So how, if at all, how has TSK influenced that work?
It was a little difficult as much, I could only do as much as people were ready for.
Mhm.
But and it's so frustrating when you see people in pain and you know how they can be pulled out of it. But only they can do it, and they may not be ready for it. But I think space is the easiest thing to get across and to teach, and and just having people integrate or recognize space it helps so many issues. The distance from their feelings and greater openness. And let me just think a minute, because I did work with people recognize and helping them to recognize that when they say I'm depressed, it's not I'm depressed. I am having a feeling, which is depression.
Hmm.
And so getting that distance.
Right. That's one thing that Well, when you said I am time and space, and I really felt how you were sitting with that, it made me think about how, you know, we can occupy a bystander self, or, be locked into that kind of identity or story. And you were standing there in the time and space. And so that's what made me pivot to ask about the psychotherapy question, because it really feels like there is a kind of a loosening or something in that goes to the heart of a lot of psychological fixations.
Yeah, I agree with, yes, absolutely.
I saw also that you are doing some work around aging. And
Oh, so where did you get this material from the Nyingma Institute or?
yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, yes. Yes, well, when I was teaching at the Nyingma Institute, I was teaching workshops and retreats on aging consciously, and that integrated a lot of Buddhist psychology and dealing with impermanence. But in my class now, we were talking about this the other day, that one of the, from a Buddhist point of view, the greatest, one of the greatest sources of suffering is impermanence, and the lack of ability to deal with that. So what we have worked on a lot, and everybody is really there with it, is being present, recognizing that the past is a thought in the present, the future is a thought in the present, and the only thing that is real is this moment, this present moment. And if you're in this present moment, there's no comparison with an hour ago, or something in the future. I mean, it's just, and that eases pain of impermanence, because it's with you this moment and that moment and that moment. So that is one of the things that we've worked on, and then also the whole another source of pain, of course, is I, me, mine, and loosening the and for me that is very loose, a concept of I or me or mine, and loosening those concepts.
And what do you find is effective for loosening those concepts?
Oh, that's let me see. What can I say now? Well, that's it's hard to give a pithy answer to that.
Sure. It's only been with us for the dawn of time.
But the class really is, they've gotten it. And we worked with a lot of things, but one of the interesting things we worked on is most people identify their body as themselves.
Mm.
And when we've worked with Kumne, it's recognizing that it's the body doing this. And we say, and 99% of the things that we do during the day is the body doing it. Mm-hmm. So when I say I'm brushing my teeth, not exactly your body is brushing its teeth. Mm-hmm. And then your awareness can be thinking about lunch, what somebody said to you, or it can be aware of what your body is doing. And so then this leads to an awareness of awareness. That sounds pretty esoteric, but that's that once one experiences that, it's a tremendous opening. And the thing, this again, this may be getting too esoteric, but another important thing for me is concept of time. And if you talk about being aware of your body, when we're doing kumne, the body is doing kumne, and you're just aware of it, you can think there's a duality that then comes in, the awareness but the element that ties it together is time. So and I have to say that I experience time as an arising of everything at every moment. And then it's your mind that connects the dots. So all of this is happening. What's tying it together is that it's presenting at the same moment. Does that make any sense to you?
It does. Yeah. I almost want to do something unconventional here, but it just was arising for me, kind of an orthogonal move to our interview, doing a stepping outside of the interview in a moment, in that even before you started talking about awareness of awareness, I was feeling in the field that we have right now an awareness of awareness unfolding. And for me, sometimes the sense of time is, impermanence is this sense of passing away, but there's also impermanence is the bubbling new, the constant creative arising. And for me, there's a sparkling scintillation of timing in that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But getting back to helping people, if just the realization that the past in this moment is just a thought.
Mm. Right. Yeah, we don't have to believe everything we think, right?
Right.
In terms of your work with aging, and I don't know if you've done anything in that from the TSK point of view, but I'm curious if your growing appreciation for time has impacted your own sense of aging.
I have to say that I don't have a sense of aging.
Mm.
So, I mean, this moment is this moment. And I think with aging, again, what what causes them pain is that they're comparing it. They're comparing. And the only thing that exists, if it exists, because, we don't know if it is all an illusion or not, but within this illusion, the only thing that's relatively exists is this moment. So so whatever I am right now is it. That's it. I've been getting pretty esoteric. I hope that's okay on this broadcast.
It really is. Yeah, I think just the feedback that I've been getting from people who've been exposed to these conversations, they appreciate both the personal stories, but also the 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 slices of insight into experience, which may be esoteric seeming for people without that experience, but is not that esoteric if you've got that experience.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't seem esoteric to me, but it just seems that if somebody didn't know anything about any of this, it would seem pretty esoteric.
Right, right.
So I have to tell you that I think my life seems to have always had some magic to it.
Mm.
And right now, this is at this point right now, it's magical in that my husband and I have found this community. It's an over 55 community, but there's a wonderful feeling of community here, and a lot of interaction with other people in the community. And so it allows for a lot of blossoming of compassion, feeling of connection and compassion.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I think especially post-COVID, so many people have lost a lot of the social connections that they had. And I encounter around me a lot a real hunger among people for feeling into and discovering community again.
It's amazing the impact that had, isn't it?
Really is. In some of these discussions, I've been speaking with some newer practitioners of TSK, people just discovering it within the last decade or so. And I think there's some growing interest in bringing TSK into some new contexts. One of my conversations is with somebody around that. And for you, looking at where the world is right now and your experience of TSK, what would you like to see happening next for this body of teachings?
Well, that is something I don't really think about very much, to tell you the truth. I say that and at my age now, the way I feel that I'm carrying through with TSK is first the class that I'm teaching, and I really do try to impart whatever my understanding is, but also the person that a TSK practitioner becomes, just presenting in the world. In other words, just the people that I've contact with, and even briefly, I really do feel as if they kind of get something. If I'm embodying it, my understanding, then some part of that gets through to other people. And that's one of the things I meant about living here and interacting with people, is that I'm able to I don't want to be grandiose, but impart some of the equanimity and some of the joy and some of the the results of the work that I've done, and so each person can impact, even to a minimal degree, other people. I think that's really very valuable.
Definitely.
But I don't know. I've been actually been in some discussions about where does it go from, and I do think that it would the application TSK into other areas and fields it would be a wonderful thing, and I think it would lend itself very well to it. But that's just not something I think about.
We've talked a couple times in reference, referred to your class that you're teaching on TSK right now. And is there more that you could share about that, how it's structured and what
Yes,
you're
sure.
exploring?
Yeah. Well, it started when I moved to Reno, and there's a little Tibetan Buddhist center here. And so I went to that center and taught some Kumne. And when COVID hit, the center shut down, and so I started teaching online. I was teaching just Kumne there. I started teaching online, and then it evolved, and I stopped doing it through the center because I don't charge anything, and they wanted all of their classes to, all of their workshops or whatever to charge, and I just said I didn't want to do that. But in any case, so by then I had students online, and it's really an incredible group. And I started doing what I saw discussion before the Kumne, and the discussion became bigger and bigger and bigger, and I started integrating my understanding into these discussions, and a lot of it with TSK, and we started doing two things with TSK, and then we integrated that into the Kumne and combined the two of them. And I also I record it and I send it to other people who can't be at the class, and they regularly watch the recordings.
How many people are in these groups?
Well, the core group itself is very small. It's two couples, but I then send it out to several other people. So it's not big, but it's very they've gone very deeply.
And do you work with any texts, or is it focused more on practice and conversation, or
Practice and conversation? Yeah, half of it, it's an hour and a half, and half of it is Kumne practices, but the Kumne practices incorporate some of the things we've talked about before.
Right, including the contact in the sense of spaciousness and
yes,
right.
and non-duality, and other things like that.
Wonderful. And what do you feel has been really most impactful? There are multiple spiritual paths that you've worked with, but what do you feel has been really most impactful, the gift that you've received from TSK, if that's even articulable?
Well, I don't know if it's as I said, I would be unrecognizable to myself if I hadn't studied and practiced TSK. So I sat in meditation for 30 years, and I never do that anymore. I feel like my life is my meditation. And so I don't want to sound it sounds grandiose, but I practice TSK all day.
Mm.
And that there are things, there are some things that are incorporated into that aren't really TSK or more Buddhism. But I don't know that I have to draw a distinction in my living.
Right, right. Yeah, I want to say, without even a shred of condescension or anything like that, I really am impressed with you at 90 years old doing Zoom teachings.
Oh,
Um,
I thought that was really funny. As soon as you found out my age, you asked something about it. You wondered if I could use Zoom. And there were other things, and I think, oh, he's going to expect this little old lady. Is he going to be surprised?
Wonderfully surprised. Yeah. I won't name names, but some of the other people that I've talked to in this series, they had to have other people turn the machine on for them. And so
Oh,
that's why I asked that. So
hmm.
hmm.
Yeah, I do think that I can see my body falling apart, but I think my mind is still okay.
Yeah. My mother is in hospice right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And but of course it's sad for us children, but there's also you I'm I think we're all witnessing in our own ways a real ripening of time, um, as she sits there and is open to the void and whatever is going to be next. She's totally okay with that. But it's really kind of beautiful to watch how so many different strands from life are all um, being recognized for their unity, for their contribution to whatever is sitting here ripened on the edge of what's next.
Would you say more? Because it's about that, because it sounds very, and that's intrigues me, and I don't know exactly what you mean.
She had a dream many years ago when she was, a young woman. We were kids, of being taken up into the sky, and it ended up in a lot of gorgeous array of colors and sound. And she had this voice say that, you are a universal symphony. Um,
Wow.
and she remembered that, but now, as she's lying in bed and she's, just waiting for the close of her chapter, she just has been really reflecting on that and feeling how the wounds, the pains, the surprises, the accomplishments, the losses, all of those are part of uh, you know, a single threaded symphony, right? Um, she's feeling, uh, I guess, the inseparability of all of that from the moment that she inhabits each moment.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's interesting. Somebody said to me, was sharing with them how my mother died, how my father died, and this person said the last lesson that a parent can give you is how to die.
Mm, right. Yeah, I think she's giving a beautiful gift to all of us.
How old is she?
She's 89,
Mm.
but she's got emphysema.
Oh,
And yeah, when I was a young man, I worked in a hospital, and I used to deliver food to people's rooms. And there were two experiences at that time. One, I was carrying food into a room, and I came in, and the man was completely arched back, fingers clawed, screaming, and a priest was standing over reading last rites, and the man was just hurling curse words and in a tremendous amount of pain and suffering and rage at what was happening to his body. And of course, I left the room. Um, there was another lady I'd seen there for a few weeks, and I'd gotten to know her. And one day I walked into the room, and she looked about 15 years younger. And there was this golden light just filling the room in an utter silence. And I knew in that moment that she had just died.
Mm.
And I backed out of the room and put my tray back in. And so at that moment, the alarm for the life support thing then went off
Well,
to
that's a
call the nurses
wonderful
into the room.
story, Bruce.
Yeah. So those left an indelible imprint, on how do we approach that end.
Mhm.
And I'm feeling gifted in the way that my mother's holding it.
Yes, absolutely. Have you, I know we're going off subject, but have you read much in near-death experiences?
I've read some, yes. I read, some very interesting reports on that.
Yeah, I had a little Elon Goldstein and I um, over the years have had online or email dialogues, and both, and he taught that was one of the subjects he taught at one time on so he turned me on to a lot of readings, and it's really fascinating, uh, the how prevalent certain experiences are.
It really is. Yeah, you know, I try to keep an open mind about what happens without holding on to it too much. But one thing I feel about TSK is, in a way, no matter what happens, in a way it can prepare you to meet whatever happens.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And yeah, and absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I was just, did you, this may not be of your time, but I forget whether it was Dune or, so one of these books that in the 70s was very popular, and there was a word, grok. Did you ever hear that? GROK?
Yes. Yeah.
And
That was, I believe it was Stranger in a Strange Land.
very possibly, yeah. And that's a wonderful word. Understand that I get it at a gut level is,
Yes. Right. Right. Yeah. Knowing that I don't even want to say anything about it because grok is grok.
right, right, right.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, in looking over some of what you've seen of the other conversations and what we've talked about here, uh, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, to contribute to this series of conversations about TSK and what it means or what it can mean for people?
Yes, well, what I recognized when I saw a lot of the interviews or parts of them were that the work that people that people were doing was a lot of food for conversation. Whether it's translating the TSK books and founding CCI or teaching Tarthang Tulku's books all over the country and whatever. And I don't have anything, I knew that we wouldn't have that element here. But I think that I wish I could give the gift of TSK to everyone.
Mm.
It's so there's no greater gift.
Mm.
There's no greater gift. And everything that we can do to give that gift would be wonderful. So just looking over just think of TSK in my life and in other people's lives, it never ends. And in other words, as you work with it more and more, it gets fuller and fuller and fuller.
Mm.
But it's so transformative in terms of people suffering and finding meaning and all. It's just incredible. And I guess it's too bad that everybody isn't ready for it.
Mm. Right. I will thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think so.
Great. Well, yeah, I've really appreciated the chance to get to know you and hear about how you've worked with TSK in your life. It's really beautiful.
Well, thank you very much, Bruce. And it was pulling it all together for me was really a very nice experience, because I don't do that very much, look at the way it has flowered and, and well, the way it's the permutations of it,
Mm. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.